The dawn of the sleeping world. Elorin Brightlea woke before the sparrows finished deciding their first bright syllables and lay in the tender hush that lives between night and day, listening to the ancient tower breathe the way a kind elder breathes, steady and untroubled, wood easing in its joints, stone remembering the cool of the river, curtains tasting a pale blue as if the sky were learning the room, and in that gentleness he felt again the warm memory of the golden key that had opened not halls or cupboards but moments, fitting the locks of feeling and time until each door swung inward and he had found himself sitting in rooms of courage, patience, and soft necessary truth. He pressed his palm to the wall so the tower would feel his hello, and the wall answered with a low sweetness, a resting hum that made the boards underfoot seem like old friends waiting to walk with him through first light. He rose and washed his face in water that had come from upstream springs and had kept its promise of freshness. And he buttered a slice of bread while the candle that never tired held a round, faithful glow, and the traveler light leaned as if listening to the river. He tucked a sprig of mint behind his ear because the morning enjoyed little courtesies, tied his laces slowly so the day would feel unrushed, and opened his window to the orchard, the river bend, the waking fields, and the faint silver of moon that liked to watch even when the sun approached. He thought of Master Aldrin, whose footsteps sounded like assurances and whose eyes always gave more time than clocks would measure, and he wondered whether his mentor knew as he now knew, that the greatest journey is not a line upon a map but a circle quietly brightening in the chest. At the stair he paused to listen to the house with both ears and with the polite hearing of his shoulders and hands, and then he went down to the warm kitchen and set a little pot of milk upon the stone. When Aldrin came in with the soft scratch of a book page still on his fingers, the two of them shared the first sips without needing to say why they were smiling. And the elder spoke as one speaks to a morning, gently and with respect, that a day will reveal more if you ask for less at once. And Elorin felt those words fold themselves into the pockets of his robe like small helpful handkerchiefs. Later Elorin stepped outside with a basket to gather herbs for the day, and the air felt as calm as a held breath before a blessing. And the dew that had taken lessons from the stars sat politely on leaves, and the grass gave back his steps without keeping a single one. He walked toward the river path, and Luma came out of the hedge with dew threaded through her whiskers like beads of morning, the silver along her fur taking the light as if it had a friendly conversation to continue, and she brushed lightly against his knee before trotting ahead with the serene authority only a fox carries so quietly. As he followed, he sensed the valley yawning in the most dignified way, hills unrolling their green, the distant village turning in sleep, boats at their moorings remembering water, hens anywhere in the world beginning to think about a new egg. And a thought settled through him like a feather, that all creatures belong to dawn whether they wake to meet it or let its hand pass over their dreams. At the river he crouched on the wooden landing where steps meet water and dipped his fingers into the cool, and the stream accepted him as if he were another kind of fish that only visits the surface. And the ripples he made traveled to reeds and back, and in those ripples he saw the smallest pictures, echoes of journeys now complete, the lights along the current that carried memory, the cat with silver paws, the garden blooming by stars, the wind-written library, the river of slow hours, the harp beneath the floor, the bridge of soft voices, the owl with dream dust, the pillow field, the candle maker's wishes, the ocean like breathing, the sleeping dragon, the inward compass, the night market, the silent bell. And at the end of this procession of kindness he saw himself standing in the circle of early light with the golden key within his heart and a door opening upon today. He rose and the day rose with him, and together they walked the path that curved along the water and then returned toward Wistmere by the orchard wall where pears loosened their shoulders and apples practiced holding color. And when he reached the gate he noticed that his hand lifted a fraction before the latch, as if greeting the instant before touching it, and that greeting made the latch feel lighter. Inside the courtyard Master Aldrin stood with a kettle and 2 cups as if morning had placed them there, and he said that when a long walk ends the feet still like to move. So a gentle walk within the self is a wise continuation. And Elorin told of the river and the ripples and the bright parade of remembered gentleness. And Aldrin nodded and said the world was grateful to him for seeing it with such patience. They ate pears on the back step and watched the light lay soft hands upon the fields. And when the second slice was done Elorin wiped the knife and felt a readiness in his chest like a door that understands its own hinge. Today he chose not to travel outward. He chose to travel through the rooms he loved and through small tasks that preferred attention to speed, so that his heart could test and keep the calm he had been given. He swept the first stair and the dust seemed thankful to become a little line he could lift with his brush and offer to the bane. And he oiled the hinge of the pantry and the hinge answered with a sigh as fine as the sound a sleeping cat makes when its paws dream. And he opened the window above the deep sink so that the river breeze could pass its hand over the jars of spices, reading their labels with its nose. Outside, the starlit garden waited even under sun, its petals content to rest though they remembered midnight. And he knelt to check each stem, finding that calm grows when someone looks kindly even while nothing is wrong. He watered sparingly, and where a leaf had browned he wrapped it in a small thanks before removing it, because the plant had clearly tried. He set bowls of clean water at the corners in case birds wished to bathe, and he whispered that night would return with gentle work to do, and the flowers accepted the message like a letter from a dear friend. Then he tended the library, not to conquer the shelves but to greet them. He straightened a line of volumes that liked to lean, pressed his hand lightly along their spines so they would know they had been noticed, lifted a book left open by a dreaming reader and asked it to rest closed. And when he passed the window of the long view he saw the village roofs learning to shine and the path of the river carrying sky without spilling. Up in the highest room the bronze bell waited with a patience that warms the eyes, and Elorin set his palm upon the rim and the silent ring traveled through his bones in a slow kindness. And his breath found its answer and became wide and smooth, and the whole tower seemed to breathe with him as if they shared a set of lungs. He thanked the bell and felt the thank you answer him from the wood, which is a true talent wood has. And he sat a while with his back against the friendly wall and remembered the way the key had turned inside him to open moments that asked to be met without hurry. In that remembering he felt a call that belonged to dawn even though the sun was climbing. A call to walk out once more and see whether the sleeping world would offer its last dreams as gifts he could carry back for those about to wake. He told Luma, who had been watching his hands with great interest as if considering the pause they became when they held kindness. And she blinked her agreement and led him down the stair and through the gate and toward the river again. Not to the landing this time, but beyond the bend where the alder trees keep their own soft time. There the world had not yet fully chosen day. The grasses along the banks wore the cool pastels of the hour before decision. The mist lay upon the water like a shawl waiting to be folded, and the early birds sang as if the first note invented itself each time it arrived. Elorin closed his eyes and listened, not to sounds only but to the way the air carried them. And in that listening he felt a second river underneath the seen one. A river of breath moving through sleepers and cottages and nests and burrows. A long and tender tide flowing toward waking. Where that tide brushed past him, he noticed small luminous seeds rising from the surface like bubbles that did not wish to burst. And when one of them touched his palm, it did not dampen it, it warmed it. And inside the warmth he received a picture, not with eyes but with the space behind them. A baker finishing a dream about a hill of flour that never collapsed and a table where many hands were dusted with laughter. And he smiled and let the seed continue on its way down the current toward the village so that the baker would carry the laughter into the oven and into loaves that would break easily and gladly. He cupped another seed, and it carried the breath of a shepherd, who dreamed of counting not sheep but breezes that visited his flock. And Elorin returned the seed to the air, so the shepherd would that day count shade instead of worries. He held a seed that belonged to a small child who floated in the gentle waters of a deep sleep. And the dream he saw was a field where every stone knew the child's name and none of them wished to be kicked. And he returned that one gently. And another brought the image of a violin sleeping in its case and choosing a melody on its own. And another held a house that remembered how to be a boat and sailed along the lanes with the cats acting as sails and the hens as dignified passengers. Wrapped in quilts, he stood and opened his hands as if they were clean windows and let another seed settle and pass, and then another, and in each he welcomed and let go. And the world seemed to say that his welcoming allowed the dreams to ripen just enough to become memories that would not crumble in the first bright hour. He breathed this river of the sleeping world and felt it answer him with gratitude that needed no words. When he and Luma followed the bank toward Wistmere, the mist rose in soft folds and drifted across the orchard lanes and into the village streets. And as it went, it touched shutters and doorstep stones and drying lines and the rims of mugs forgotten overnight. And each object accepted its small share of blessing and gave it back as scent and as softened edges. Elorin walked among these exchanges as one walks through a room where friends speak quietly, offering nods he did not need to keep and smiles that belonged to everyone. He set the bakery door ajar so that the first warmth would meet the street, left a sprig of mint in a cup by the healer's step with a bead of dew for company, righted a carved bird on a schoolroom sill so it would face the right way when seen from inside. And at each small act he felt the same roundness in his chest that he had felt at the bell, the feeling of a circle completing itself without fanfare. By the time he returned to the tower, the high clouds had chosen their shapes for the morning, and the bees were writing patient gold upon the garden air. Master Aldrin waited with a basket and said they would carry bread to those who might rise slowly today, and Elorin took the basket with both hands as if accepting a story, and together they walked the lanes offering warm loaves in exchange for nothing at all, which is the best price for such things. And for every door that opened he left a small blessing in the form of attention, and each door replied by letting the house speak. A kettle would choose that moment to sing. A small clock would decide to be quiet. A sleeping cat would draw one paw over its ear as if listening to the last note of a dream. When they had given away the last loaf, Aldrin looked toward the hills and said that Elorin had come to the end of a first great turning, and that such endings are really beginnings that have learned to speak calmly. The words settled in Elorin's chest like good stones along a path, and he knew what the elder meant. He had left the tower and returned to it, walked outward and inward at once, learned to listen for bells that made no sound and markets that opened without coin and meadows that recorded the breath of sleeping neighbors. And the golden key had shown him that every day held gentle doors he could open if he remembered to lift his hand in welcome. Back within Wistmere he chose a broom, a cloth, a feather brush, simple wands of daily kindness, and with them he walked the spiral stair from low to high, letting each room teach him again what it loved. In the kitchen he rubbed a small circle upon the kettle until it remembered it was proud to be copper. In the library he invited a reluctant book to join its companions without scolding. In the little north room he opened the window just enough for a single leaf to enter and tell its news of the tree. And in the top room he sat quietly with the bell and let it ring through his bones until every edge had softened, and in that rounding he felt the valley rounding with him. The day leaned forward and the sun came fully through, and then the light began its long glide toward afternoon. And in that glide Elorin sensed that the sleeping world was finishing its journey into waking. He also sensed that as evening came the waking world would drift back toward sleep. And between those two motions lay the gentle work he most wished to learn, the art of carrying calm back and forth like a lamp from one room to another without spilling. So he practiced in small ways. He poured water as if pouring calm. He stirred a pot of soup with the slow, even circle he had learned from the bell. He wrote a short letter of thanks to the meadow and set it upon the sill for the moths to read later. Then he went into the courtyard to speak with the pigeons, who were practicing both rest and flight at once by lifting and settling their wings in quiet rehearsal. And he read their lesson in the pampered feathers, that there is a moment in every lift where muscles remember not to hurry. When he returned to the kitchen, Master Aldrin placed upon the table a small book with a cover the color of river clay and said it would be Elorin's Book of Dawns, a place to keep the names of gentle things. Elorin opened it and on the first page wrote the word breath, on the second page wrote the word door, on the third wrote bell, and he left the fourth page blank so that the page could rest, and Aldrin smiled as if this order pleased the day. Toward evening they climbed the stair together and stood by the high window, and the river carried the remains of gold into the west while the first silver returned to the east, and the world arranged itself like a bed being made with deliberate hands. Elorin touched the bell and felt the dear vibration travel outward, and he watched how it seemed to lay itself over the orchard, the lanes, the roofs, and the far ridge, and how wherever it settled the color deepened. At that moment he knew with the certainty of a planted tree that his first journey had indeed come to its round end. He had gone out to meet lights and bridges and owls and keys, and each had shown him a way back to himself. And now the self he returned to was larger and quieter and more easily shared. He turned to Master Aldrin, who had been watching the same light with the knowing smile of someone who recognizes an arrival, and the elder placed a hand on Elorin's shoulder with a pressure that matched the weight of a bird, which is to say it was light and complete, and he said that the work of a wizard is to be a good place for peace to rest. Elorin promised he would try, and the promise felt not like a burden but like an opened hand. They went down and ate their soup at a table that had decided to be simple, and they spoke of what needed doing the next day as if friends were speaking nearby, not too loud and not too long. Later Elorin took a small lamp and walked the rooms once more, not to inspect but to greet the night as it arrived at each window. And in each room he placed his palm upon the sill and let the cool of outside kiss his hand, and each room returned the kiss with its own warmth. When he had finished, he stood in the center of his little bedchamber and closed his eyes and let the whole tower appear within him as a soft drawing, the base stones and the steps and the beams and the rooms stacked like gift boxes. And when the drawing was steady, he imagined the valley appearing around it and the river going on with its same old new story. And he felt himself in that picture as a small warm dot that invited other dots to rest. He opened his eyes to find the real room waiting in the same way, and he felt grateful for the readiness of everything. He set the traveler light beside the tireless candle and watched the two flames nod to one another like cousins, then placed a bowl upon the sill to catch the first star, a ritual he had learned and made his own, and he straightened his pillow and smoothed the blanket the way one smooths the fur of a sleeping animal to be sure it knows it is safe. Before he lay down, he went to the window once more and looked out over the valley that was beginning to breathe like a giant creature folding itself for sleep, fox paths shining faintly, barn roofs cooled to the color of blue smoke, the river drawing a tender line like a pen that prefers kindness. He spoke, not loudly and not with any word that needed to be kept, only with the sound that gratitude makes on its way into the world. And the world answered with the softest cricket string and the farthest owl note and the low patient turning of water around an old stone. He returned to the bed and lay upon his side and felt Luma settle behind his knees. A perfect curve warming a perfect hollow, and he felt his breath lengthen to meet the room, and he let his eyes grow heavier the way fruit grows sweet. Just before sleep he knew in the clearest way that the dawn he wished to give to others was inside him now. Not the bright outer light alone, but the inner pale that makes all colors kind. And he smiled without trying to make a smile. And the smile stayed as easily as mist stays over a meadow until the sun suggests otherwise. And as Elorin's eyes drift closed, the quiet of his world becomes yours, carrying you softly into